Welcome to K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung, and class is now in session. Today is called Live. It is a 2018 Korean drama based on the police force in South Korea. It was written by No Hee-kyung, and No Hee-kyung is one badass bitch. She's been writing Korean dramas since the late 1990s. She's written over 24 Korean dramas. A number of them are critically acclaimed, and they won prizes, and they had high ratings. She's worked with a number of A-list Korean celebrities, including Hyunbin, including Song Hye-kyo, including Kim Hae-soo, Bae Yong-jun, Kim Gap-soo. She's worked with very massively talented Oscar-winning actresses like Yoon Yo-jung. She's worked with mega godmother-like status actresses like Go Do-sim. She is a very talented Korean drama writer, and I would say she's probably one of my favorite K-drama screenwriters. I genuinely love her screenplays because they are always centered on female complexities. Women who have very strained relationships with their own mothers, and that wreaks havoc in their love life or in their professional life. You probably will recognize some of her shows like It's Okay, That's Love. That's a big one with Choi In-sung and Kong Hyo-jin. That's probably one of my favorite Korean dramas that she's written. She's also done that very bizarre Japanese drama remake called In the Winter That Wind Blows, that also had Choi In-sung in it, but Song Hye-kyo was his co-star. So she's very versatile. She kind of plays around with some of the campy weird stuff, like Padam Padam. That was like a weird campy fantasy drama that was also very much infused with heavy realism for a masculine protagonist. So I don't know, like she's really hard to sort of pin down and say like this is who she is, because she's done such a diversity of shows, and I appreciate her for that. But the one consistent through line with No Hee-kyung's Korean dramas is, again, it's about complicated relationships with mothers. So that whole thing is like, it's almost a constant theme in all of her shows. So you'll definitely see that. And it's very appropriate that we're talking about No Hee-kyung and mother-obsessed screenwriters, because the guest for today is also a screenwriter who is obsessed with his mother, even though he probably wouldn't come right out and say it. But it's apparent to all of his friends, including myself. Shinho Lee is a very dear friend of mine. He is a very talented screenwriter. He is probably most renowned for co-writing the Korean screenplay for the film The Chaser, which is directed by Na Hong-jin. And I remember watching that movie when I was just out of college, and I was living in Seoul, Korea, as a Fulbright researcher. And I remember seeing that movie on TV, and I remember being scared for my life every single time I went outside to walk in the dark. Like, that movie scared the shit out of me. And Shinho is very much like a thriller action kind of screenwriter, although he's also done some romantic movies as well. But But he's a really interesting person. I always enjoy having conversations with him. He's got a lot of great insights. He was generous and kind enough to even show up in one of my classes and be this guest speaker for my students at one point. And, I actually just had dinner with him 2 days ago here in New York. I'm still here in New York. I am also going through this weird sort of reckoning right now. I don't know what else to call it other than a reckoning, because whenever I come back to New York, I sort of go through this phase where I'm like re-examining my whole life and where I am and what I'm doing, and it's a weird time for me at the moment because I am finished with my PhD. I am done with my dissertation, so I am officially Grace Jung PhD. But there are 0 jobs in the arts and humanities, right? All the money is still going to STEM, and that has been the case, and it continues to be the case, and it is far worse given the pandemic. But I was definitely dealing with this sort of spiral, and this is a spiral that every single artist goes through, and they go through it, several times in their lifetimes, I would say. And, I was just sort of at this point where I was kind of questioning everything I did. I was questioning all my decisions. I was questioning all the work that I did as a writer, as a comedian, as whatever, and as an academic. I was questioning all my decisions. But then when I went to New Jersey on Monday to meet up with a couple of my childhood friends and seeing how they have houses, they have husbands, they have children, they have pets, I was just looking at their lives and I was just like, wow, this is so foreign to me. And this is so much the kind of life that I never, ever would want in my present day. I mean, kudos to them for getting that, because that is the typical American dream, right? Getting a home and a family and a dog. But I can't imagine myself doing any of those things because my happy place is being on stage. I mean, that's the most important thing for me. But yesterday I met up with a dear old friend of mine named Vong Pak. If you guys don't know who Vong Pak is, I would say Google him, get to familiarize yourself with New York City performance art history. He's a street performer, he's a changu player, he's a Korean drummer, and a traditional Korean drummer. And he's, he was sort of being the street performer since the late 1990s. And he teaches traditional Korean drumming to students, and, he's very beloved in the New York community, the New York art community, as well as the New York Korean American community. He is known in the Korean community. And yet, when I met up with him yesterday to have dinner, I saw that he was struggling, with self-doubt, plagued by voices of criticisms that came from other people and not from himself. And I was just like, well, I mean, this is the artist's way, right? It's constantly being told that what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing doesn't matter. What you're doing makes no sense. But that is why artists are supposed to be artists, because they're not supposed to make sense. In the world the way it is, we're not supposed to make sense. We are freaks, all right? We are fucking animals and gods. We're nothing like these Jersey bitches with their houses and their kids and their dog and their whatever. We're not like that. We're supposed to be alone, fully recognize that, accept that and appreciate that, and focus only on the art. I mean, that clarity just came to me very, very vividly recently. As I was walking from the 7 train back to this apartment, I was just like, what is my priority? My priority is comedy. No relationship to any person in my life will ever come between me and comedy. And what is that? What is that? It's like my relationship with a bunch of strangers in the audience. I mean, that is what I am prioritizing over a spouse or a child or a dog or a parent or a friend. And that will always be the case. I mean, at least for now, that is definitely the case for me. And, I'm not in a relationship at the moment by choice. And I don't know. I'm open to being either alone or with someone. Either way, I will probably not tell the person if I ever end up with them. I will probably not tell them that they're going to be secondary, but they will be. They will be secondary to my craft always, because I know who and what I am. And I realize that the importance of an artist's community is precisely these kinds of moments, these kinds of ruptures, when we are shook by society and capital and the way that everybody around us dictates how to live, which is to chase money, to chase the dollar. And, I remember even when I wrote my first book, I was 22 when I started writing my first book, and I was 24 or 25 when the book came out. But I remember people around me just asking extremely insensitive and personal questions about how I'm making money off of that book, And if you're not an artist, and if you go around asking those kinds of questions to artists, I'll tell you right now that is very, very rude, and it's lame, because that's none of your business. And also, that question is irrelevant. How do you make your money as an artist? It is the most irrelevant question to an artist, because to an artist, what matters is the process. The final work doesn't even matter to an artist. The process is what matters to an artist. The millions and millions of thoughts and feelings that they struggle through as they're creating something new, that is the meaning for an artist, not the final product. The final product in and of itself can destroy itself. It can go away. And being able to let go of that is a sign that that artist has fully encountered and come to terms with the fact that they are going to die, right? So I just, the last 2 weeks was very challenging for me, but I'm glad I went through that challenge, because I learned two very, very big lessons. The one big lesson is that I got to understand my mind a little bit better. The last 2 weeks was difficult because I had this voice inside my head that was telling me that my work was insignificant, meaningless, and worthless. That voice was telling me that I made all the wrong moves in my life, and that I deserve more. That I deserve more. I should be recognized, and I should be compensated more. I mean, these were all very toxic and horrible thoughts, and words that I myself don't say to myself. And I don't say those things to other artist friends of mine, but it was in there. And it was particularly loud these last 2 weeks, and I was wondering why. And I realized now why. It's because I picture locked my movie. The colorist finished it yesterday, and everybody around me is saying, congratulations on picture locking your film. Congratulations on making your first short film as a director. I submitted my dissertation 2 weeks ago, and everybody around me is congratulating me for completing my doctorate degree. If and when these kinds of negative voices get loud, it's only loud because the good voices are also happening at the same time, right? And, depending on who your parent was and what kind of environment you grew up in, that negative voice and its sense of permanence will vary. And I'm constantly battling those voices inside my head. And I realize now that whenever those voices get very loud inside my head, all it means is things are going well for me as an artist. It means that I am succeeding, if not on the path to success. That's the only reason why those voices get loud. So I was able to sort of understand and learn something about myself in a very profound way very recently. And I realized also the other reason why I needed to go through this the last 2 weeks and have that recognition on Thursday is because by Friday, I was meeting up with this old friend of mine, Vong Pak, who's very accomplished, and he was going through the same thing. And I had to just tell him, right, not to listen to those voices, those criticisms that unfortunately come from the closest people around you, your family. He had been struggling with that for 4 years. I mean, 4 years of hell just wandering, a sense of loss. And we spent several hours together just talking and just supporting each other, just giving recognition to each other on all the good that we accomplished. And sort of looking back on the last 10 years together as friends and sort of taking the time to just say, oh, remember when you did this, remember when you did that, This is why I admire you. This is why I love you. This is why you're great. And, we forget that, even though we're the ones who made all that good shit happen. So, I don't know. And a lot of this stuff comes up again in my discussion with today's guest, Shinho Lee. So yeah, take the time to really let those words sink in. If you're an artist, and if you're an academic in arts and humanities, and you're constantly struggling with self-doubt, self-criticism, imposter syndrome, just know that if those voices get very, very loud in your skull, all it means is good shit is all around you right now. And you have a choice to either give into those negative voices or to let in the supportive and nice compliments that are coming your way from the people around you. And I say choose the latter.
I think from New York to Berlin to LA, that messed you up.
All the time.
The world is
When is it
should
gonna
be one
stop?
time zone.
But it was so wonderful having you in our class. Like when you came
Uh-huh.
in as a guest speaker, I was like, man, like they're so lucky. They got a real live fucking screenwriter, for Korean TV and movies to talk to them. They're so lucky, like, and I think they appreciated it too. Like they were like really
Oh, that's good.
fascinated by the things that you said, and like
Mm.
especially when you were talking about like all the Han stuff. I was like, oh no, here we go. And like they they were like eating it up. They loved it, you know?
Mm.
So the week after and the week after that, like I did talk about Han a little bit, like
Mm.
contextualize it for them.
Hmm.
But it's funny, like Han almost becomes like this thing where we get to kind of excuse anything and like among Koreans.
It's an excuse for extreme cinema. Man or woman don't matter.
Don't matter. Yeah. It's like, why are Korean movies so like intensely gory and like misogynistic? Oh, because of Han. Oh, okay.
Exactly. Or why is all daughters-in-law crazy, Han?
Oh, it's the Han. Why are all the mother-in-laws so mean? Oh, it's the Han.
Exactly.
Why do
And then
Koreans drink so much? It's the Han.
exactly. And then like there's no limit to things, right? Like it's so extreme that like there's nothing stopping them, right? It's
Yeah.
Han.
Do you think that that sort of becomes like this crutch then almost like because like if that becomes the reason or the explanation for everything and anything that's like quote unquote wrong with Koreans, right?
I th I think like a similar comparison might be, when you watch French films, like
Hmm.
they have like a sort of their ideas of sexuality is like way out there sometimes,
Hmm.
like a lot of times actually.
Are you
So
basing this on French films or French people?
both. So if you apply like a American standard to them, like
Yeah.
everything is incorrect in a way, right?
We're like pilgrims. Like
Right.
we're like Quakers in petticoats compared to the
So
French.
so if you watch movies like Elle, right? Like she
Mm.
gets raped in the beginning of the film, and then she
Hmm.
finds who's done it, and then
Hmm.
she likes it. That's fucked
Yep.
up.
Yeah.
That's fucked up. Americans cannot go there.
No, but what was more fucked up about that movie is not
Hmm.
only that, but that in the end, everybody knew.
Hmm. Hmm.
And everybody, it was just like everybody was like okay with it.
It's like her choice.
Her choice. Also, the wife, like the wife knew.
I know, right?
And The guy that she was banging, like his wife also knew that she like they were having an affair. Like everybody just was like accepting the fucked upness of these like messed up marriages.
It's like a 부부의 세계, like season 10.
Oh my god, Pupu's Hege is so intense, but like also hilarious.
I think the flaw is, I mean, we use Han as an excuse to take characters to the extreme places, whoever they are. But compare that to Dr. Foster.
Mm.
Like, what I liked about Dr. Foster was that it really captured the middle-aged women's like sort of mentality and psyche, and then like, and the she was not in it, just in a small town, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like nobody's really crazy wealthy, and then she's
Mm-hmm.
exploring her sexuality again. All those things were like sort of
Um,
about her, but then in
mm-hmm.
부부의 세계, like a camera became the misogyny.
Yeah.
So it's like a torture session, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it got exhausting because of that, and also
Mm-hmm.
I really believe this. Maybe I'm too Americanized, but I think for that way of storytelling to work, you got to have a humor with it. Otherwise, it's just too much.
It is. It's like that show Penthouse, which is extremely. It's like makjang times a billion. It's like makjang on turbo drive, and it's hilarious to watch. And they're all in on it. They all know how ridiculous it is. Like you could see in the actors' faces how ridiculous it is. The writer knows how ridiculous it is. Director, everybody's in on it. And it's still exhausting even though you know they're in on it, but it's entertaining, you know? Like it's like when I'm like out of things to watch and I'm like I just need something kind of like to clear the head to numb me out. I'll watch that,
Yeah.
you know, with Eugene from SES.
But then the Korean TV shows, like each episode is so long,
Yeah, they are.
so long.
But the series, they don't have like a good zillion seasons. I mean, now they kind of do, but even with like that Penthouse series, like the writer, I mean, she does like long, like 175 episode kind of like series, you know. So what they, I guess this one they broke it up into seasons, but
Yeah,
essentially it's one
even
long
Ane
season.
Yuhok was like over 50 episodes, I guess, and then but then each
Yeah.
one was only 30 minutes, but they were running the show like every day during the week. It's
Hmm.
like it's too much.
Yeah. The what do you call it? The everyday dramas, the serial.
Um,
What do you call it?
일일 연속극.
Yes. Yeah, I was doing some like research on that because for my next book, I want to write about Korean dramas and like just some basic theory, some basic historical context, and I'm reading up. I'm slowly starting to read up on it and get into the research, and it's just like interesting how the Korean television industry had to invent programming and conceptualize programming, conceptualize what a TV show is. Like the very first TV drama was like a theater piece, you know, like just one camera, single camera, just still frame, you know, just going at it. And I was that's they had to evolve and adapt and make it into something. And I don't know, like I mean how much like I don't know if like you know much about Korean drama history, but like do you have any idea when Korean dramas like made this like more certain step towards like female driven narratives or female viewership focused narratives? Like when did the producers and programmers say, "Oh, okay, TVs are in the domestic space. They're watched by women who are in the domestic space. They're like I don't know, like 멸치똥 like removing kind
Yeah.
of thing while watching TV, you know. And then they figured it out. So they're like, okay, let's put more women-driven narratives in. You know, like did that happen like in steps similarly to how America was doing? Because America went through the same kind of eureka moment and realized like TV's a domestic thing.
I
I don't
think
know.
based on all the TV shows that I watched when I was little,
Mm.
like 80s, 90s,
Mm-hmm.
one thing for sure is that Korea had a very strong daytime soap tradition. So
Mm-hmm.
we call it like 아침 drama, morning
Mm-hmm.
soap operas. So those are the shows that like Korean housewives used to watch. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
still have them.
Yeah.
Uh, and then that's why if you look at, Korea has like airs like episodes like twice a week usually,
Mm-hmm.
right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday. So the weekend slots are the most popular slots because everybody's home, or could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But during that time, I remember seeing more TV shows about not just about like a domestic issues told from women's point of view, but also historical dramas or like a stories written by men or directed by
Mm-hmm.
men. They're
Mm-hmm.
a mixture of things shown in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
But then daytime soap was all about women,
Mm-hmm.
mothers, mothers-in-laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Korean version of like a General Hospital, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
makjang, right? Like
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
But what changed, I think, like I'm not sure how accurate this assessment is, but when more women started working,
Mm-hmm.
I think after 97, big recession in Asia, that actually drove more women to workplaces. Similarly, in America, like after the Great Depression, right? More women had to work.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, because the viewership dropped during the day, because of course more women are now at work.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought more of those makjang dramas into those like prime evening slots.
Ah,
Think. I think that's what happened.
that makes sense
Yeah.
logically. Fascinating.
Mm.
Yeah. When you were I mean, I know you were trained in the States, but like when you were I mean, this your first TV show that you're working on, or have you
Yeah.
worked on other
I mean,
like
I worked on like a pilot and a Bible, things like that here and there, but
right,
this is actually the first one I'm actually writing it.
like the
Yeah.
first K-drama that you're writing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know, like do you have to get into a different frame of mind for this or
I think on a daily basis or like whenever I have meetings, I am actually dealing with the misogyny in a
mm,
way. I realize how male-driven still everything is
in what aspect? That's interesting.
because the story I'm working on is based on a film script I wrote before.
Mm-hmm.
It's a female-driven action film.
Mm-hmm.
So all the settings and the main plots involve the life around this female character.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I have to expand the scope and then, expand her world. And then by creating more characters and the subplots. And then, of course, there is a love interest in the original material. And then I had to sort of like push that more to create a bigger presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the bigger male presence,
Mm-hmm.
because they want to sort of cast like a big name, like a male star to justify the budget
Mm-hmm.
of the series, even though the setting itself, like a, I still think it should be done, from the female protagonist's point of view. But I still have to somehow find ways to accommodate it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's challenging in a way that, like, sort of fundamentally, had I known this condition, probably I would have picked different story or different premise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're as daring as they want to be,
Mm-hmm.
especially like in network channels. They still want to see more big name male actors to play the big roles because they still believe that that brings bigger viewership,
Right.
rather.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, and you would know like that there is some truth to that. Not to say that like a bigger name will equal a successful show, because I mean we've seen I don't know like Mr. Sunshine.
Right.
they it had all the elements and it
Yeah.
should have worked, but
Yeah.
it wasn't good. Uh, but yeah, like, so you think more daring would have been like casting like an up and coming, younger, maybe no name kind of person rather than a big name, and sort of giving that female, the actress, essentially some more screen
Mhm.
presence, more commanding presence, you think? By not having her overshadowed with a bigger name?
I would compare that to Hollywood blockbuster films. Even though we started seeing more female-driven action flicks,
Yeah.
it still is very much like male-dominant genres.
Yeah.
Like considering how old the first movie Alien was, we
Yeah.
still haven't reached that point yet, actually, even in
Like even
America.
Sicario, remember Sicario?
Yeah, yeah, she was a fake protagonist.
Yeah. It's like Benicio del Toro dominated that movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they
But
kept
she,
promoting it in the marketing as like, I mean, they said that she's
exactly.
the star. I was like, no, she isn't.
So I would say it's quite similar still in Korea, and I
Mm.
think it's unfortunate, but I think even the creators and producers and the people that are on the creative side might want to try different things or want to go for this. I think the investors and the money people, like the people who bring money in, like they're sort of their ideas are sort of fixed in that sense. So it's hard to
Yeah.
sort of try new things, especially when the budget is high and then when the risk factor is bigger, especially.
Yeah, I think with these things, it's oftentimes always going to be a negotiation, right? Because
Hmm.
it is a lucrative business when it works. It is. And it's exciting and fun. You know, who doesn't like being a part of the industry, you know? People hate it when it's bad and stressful, but when it's great, everybody loves it, you know? Um, but like, I don't know, in terms of like daring or in terms of like innovative, like what do you envision for Korean dramas, like for Korean television?
I still believe that actually, like if you look at the like a history of Korean cinema,
Mm.
for instance, there's always like that's like a big hit, once in
Mm.
a while that involves like a very strong or interesting female characters. Like
Mm.
starting with Shiri, starting with and then like My Sassy Girl,
Mm-hmm.
and the Lady Vengeance. Like there's always like sort of like specific female character that seems to sort of like put us in a sort of take us to the different place, right? Like somehow
Mm.
like the kind of female characters that we haven't seen before, rather.
Okay.
But
You wouldn't
TV, I
say you
think
wouldn't. I mean,
it's
you don't think that Park Chan-wook's movies are, even though he has female protagonists, you don't think they're misogynistic?
they are, but then but the thing is, not having them at all versus like start seeing them,
Hmm.
we're onto something, right?
Okay.
Like, so maybe the new generation of like directors, like
Mm-hmm.
the next Park Chan-wook might have a
Mm-hmm.
different spin on it, or
Mm.
we might see female Park Chan-wook in the future. Who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think even the society changes so rapidly. I think those trends or like tendency,
Mm-hmm.
right, like changes rather very slowly. I think that's quite similar everywhere, I think, in general.
For the dissertation that I'm writing, as you know, I'm writing about Korean variety shows. And, you know, television, as you also know, is like, for the most part, gendered female, you know. Even in academia, like, serious academics would study cinema, film, you know? And then the wacky weirdos who like to do fun stuff want to look at television or like Instagram posts and write their dissertation on that. So I was kind of looking at the trend, like in terms of Korean media studies, and there was a lot written about Korean film already. There's already a big book about Korean masculinity and cinema. And then I was like, all I did throughout graduate school was watch like 50,000 hours of Korean variety shows. And I was like, why isn't anybody writing about these forms of masculinity? You know, like weird forms of masculinity. It's like crying men on a comedy show
Hmm.
exhibits Korean nationalism. Like that's fucking crazy, you know? Like it's like but that's something to look at. And I was just kind of thinking through this and I got some notes from my professors as well, and they were just like you're looking at in the TV industry, which is gendered hierarchically as masculine. It's male dominated, right? As you also observed, the decision makers are men. Yeah, we have a lot of women as the writers, and even in variety TV shows like the 작가들, quote unquote, they're more or less production assistants. They're all women. Like literally like 99% of them are women, you know? And I would ask them over and over again, I'm like, why are they always women? And they were like, well, the work that we have to do as like variety show writers is we have to mostly interview the subjects and get their approval. We have to talk to, they have to be like location scouts, you know, like they do so much emotional labor, human to human engaged kind of work. And so in that sense, it is gendered female, but the hierarchy is masculine. The like the industry very much mirrors the military industry complex, and in that sense, it's very masculine. And I was just kind of like, oh, like these kinds of like gendered kind of dynamics is like it's kind of mixed up, messed up, and yet it's still segregated, which is bizarre to me, you know. And I was just like, when is it going to become more cohesive? Like, when are we going to see more female PDs, for instance? You know?
And that leads to like a typecasting as well. Like a, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you said it, right? Like we seem to have a lot of female Korean writers working on TV shows,
Mm-hmm.
dramas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then with the exception of some thriller shows,
Mm-hmm.
they only write about women, they only write about mothers, they only write
Yes.
about mothers-in-laws. It's like they get typecast to write the same materials again and again.
Hmm.
And then some of the other sort of action dramas or other genres are always just given to male writers or directors. You know, like
Yeah,
it's
that's funny too. So the
yeah.
decision makers do it that way. Like they're gendering genre. So that's what they're doing.
I think so. I think so. So action is like a male driven from their point of view, right? So, but I created a structure that sort of should be told from the female perspective,
Yeah.
and then she gets to empower herself in her own way in that framework. But then even then, that's not enough because the love interest or the male action figure in that story has to be as significant. How could I solve that problem without? I mean, I don't think they're just talking about giving him more action scenes. I think
Mm.
they want more emotional engagement, like
Mm-hmm.
with him as well, right? So I kept going back to fix some of the settings, and then it didn't work. I'm sticking to my original intent somehow,
Mm-hmm.
but by sort of changing some of the backstories and some of the structures in the first two episodes, hopefully they could be okay with this. But I don't know.
Right.
Eventually.
Do you have to get into it like a new frame of mind when or try to embody like a woman when you're writing from a female protagonist perspective?
Now, I do a lot of research, and my assistant writers are all female, and then
Oh.
from different age group, just to
Mm.
sort of learn about their speech patterns and et cetera, et
Speech
cetera.
patterns. Interesting.
And then talk a lot. I mean, in the beginning, we talked a lot about these characters' lives. You know, like especially female characters. I think I have a pretty good idea of what some of this male,
Mm-hmm.
like a action-driven characters should
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, that type of research is necessary because, especially in Korea, I mean, we're not supposed to follow the trend, but they do, and we should kind of think about those things, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
when some shows become a big hit, and then what makes this show successful? What was different about it, even though it was told from that same exact male dominant framework?
Mm-hmm.
So I do more broader research that way too, but then
Mm-hmm.
specifically to get more engaged, with the female voices, I have to somehow find my sort of roles. And I've been just watching a lot of interviews of real life characters close to that age
Mm-hmm.
of the protagonist, and But then also I have to reinvent, this fictional character on top of that because
Mm-hmm.
there's always that certain, desire in me that actually want to create something different too as a writer,
Of course.
not just to repeat what's been done.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the end, I think the setting of the story, I think it'll be good. I think for whoever plays
Mm.
this role, it'll be a good experience for the female, actor.
S-
Yeah.
So there's like a writer's room of some sorts then. Because like in my head, I imagined like there's a writer and then she has like one assistant writer. Like that's how I pictured it. But I guess you have like a writer's room of some sort. And I'm wondering like what the job description's like or
I mean, in Korea, like Europe, we don't have writer's room.
hmm.
So usually, like a main writer writes the whole thing, but
Mm-hmm.
then it's very common practice to have at least two assistant writers who
Mm-hmm.
could help the main writer with the research, and sometimes, like I give them assignments too, like to work on the
Mm-hmm.
characters,
Mm-hmm.
to see what they could bring, or just to double check to see what I'm missing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more fluid. It's not structured like a writer's room, but it's
Right.
more fluid, and I'm still leading the journey as
Right.
a main writer, but partly also because I lived in the States for so long, and so that I think I want to make sure they sound believable as well. So some of
Right.
those specific things I ask my assistant writers to sort of watch.
Uh-huh. Okay. Got it. Um no, okay, that's really interesting cuz I remember like when you were a guest in our classroom, you did say that like, you know, the Korean TV industry is similar to the Hollywood TV industry in that the writers will have more power, right? Like more or less showrunner status. Like Hollywood, we have showrunners. Like if you say showrunner, like they're the head honcho. Like the director, you're like you are not, right? So, like, would you say that Korea is somewhat adopting this showrunner mentality, or do you think just the writers just always did have the most power or final say when it came to TV writing?
I think like a writer's role for TV shows. I mean, TV genre, as a medium, it's always
Mm.
been a writer's medium
Mm.
compared to film, which is a director's medium.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who decided that, but like when you're on a set for a movie, like even directors don't welcome you. Some of them are so insecure that they don't want any writers around. And then on the spot, if they have to change some dialogue, actors and director can discuss it and then just change it, right?
Right.
But probably by then I'm already on to another film project, so I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
if it gets made, it gets made. I'm turning it
Right.
off. But
Right.
TV, I get involved with even when they read the screenplays, writers often present
Yeah.
in Korea especially, and then I
Yeah.
don't think they do. They become the role like they take up the role of showrunner,
Mm.
but I mean there'll be like a producers working acting as showrunners for the piece, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of some of the core issues involving casting or specific directions, if I have something to say, like they really sort of respect or like pay attention to what writers have to say. And of course, if you are like a big like A-level TV writer in Korea,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you become the god or goddess, right?
Kimani, Kim
Right, it's like so you can do like a kap질, they'll put up with it,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's cool what you do. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I mean, comedians are also writers, of course, and like academics are writers, of course.
yeah.
And writing requires a certain discipline, I think. Do you have like a writer's morning ritual or anything? Or writer's habits?
Morning ritual is like me going to bed because I'm I'm such a night owl
Uh-huh.
that it's just a habit that I cannot change
So you write at
somehow.
night.
But I write at night. My brain somehow, I just wake up at night.
Yeah.
And but then I go through these periods of time where like I like really immerse myself into it, and then take a few days off, and then usually
Mm-hmm.
that's when I teach, and then go jump right
Uh-huh.
back in. And when I have this like intense deadlines back to back, sometimes I have multiple projects, like a film project,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah.
Then it's draining, but rewarding, I guess, when I complete each project. So
That's cool. Um, I have this friend he's Korean American. He's gay. He lives in LA. He's a screenwriter. And he's been writing forever. He has several screenplays. He goes through like the whole, like NBC has like writers programs and like, the Academy has like writers programs. Like he's been through them. He keeps getting discouraged because I don't know, it just hasn't worked out for him yet. And of course, this is a waiting game. Oftentimes in LA, there are so many writers. Um, but I don't know. Like, what would you say to people like him who feel as though they're the reason why their success hasn't happened yet is because of their marginal status, because they're Asian and they're male, because they're Asian and they're gay, because they're, you know, um, yeah, like they feel like these kinds of identities are road blockages to them. I mean, I don't know. Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
I would say, I mean, I have a student. I mean, she graduated like a couple of years ago, and then she was born in Korea, speaks fluent Korean. She was raised in, I think, Vietnam, and then in New York,
Mm,
Queens. And then she
wow.
studied at Tisch dramatic writing at a grad program.
Hmm.
And then we had a conversation a while ago. So she asked me about her career path. In some ways, like her situation was similar to me because her Korean is fluent,
Hmm.
and then she moved to the U.S. after I think when she was in high school, I guess.
That's rough.
So I told her what my experience was like back in like early 2000s. Only projects that people want to hire Asian writers for back then. Well, a lot, like, probably my experience is limited, so this might not be true, but I think it's true. Is
Hmm.
like a, let's say, action story with some kung fu elements,
Hmm.
or like a typical like Asian cliches, right? Like a
This was in the 2000s, you're saying?
early 2000,
That's
2002,
insane.
2003. So, and then they saw me as a sort of international Asian writer, which I was. I was an international Asian writer because I was not an American yet.
Right.
So I struggled a bit, but then some of the other scripts that I wrote were
Hmm.
once they were recognized, I saw the possibility where like, oh, I could actually write
Hmm.
in Korea, like or other
Mm-hmm.
places in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of didn't limit myself in that sort of
To Hollywood.
bubble, Hollywood bubble.
Hmm.
But I think in your friend's case, if he was not born in Korea, if he was born
Hmm.
here as an
Yep.
Asian American,
Yep.
I also understand it's so easy to sort of like to think that, right? Like, oh, is it because of me? Is it because I'm
Right.
Asian? Or is it because I'm gay?
Right.
Feeling that, he's
Hmm.
marginalized. But I think the reality, I would say, I mean, there might be some truth to that, I would say. But
Hmm.
at the same time, still, if you look at the writers pool, right?
Hmm.
Like if you look at just like a young writers, right,
Hmm.
starting out, I would still say majority of them are white male writers.
Mm.
So they might get like more of them might get hired, but the truth is, like they're in a more competitive place. If you were to sort of categorize writers that way, just purely based on race,
Mm.
which I try not to do anymore because
Hmm.
it's it's just too depressing. but, but I
Right.
think so. There might be some truth to it, but I think he just has to be patient because
Mm,
it's unusual for somebody to get there like a sort of big paying gig like right away.
mm-hmm.
It takes like years, sometimes even longer. So it's like like a like any other art field. It's highly
Mm-hmm.
competitive, and but then when something works out, like my former student, she went back to Korea.
Mm-hmm.
She applied for the Korean government some kind of fund
Mm,
that helps discover like a new writers' voices, and then
great.
she got that deal, and
Mm,
then the script she worked on during that time got bought right away. So now
mm,
she has another Korean film project, and then she's going to be working on a TV show, and because she's fluent in English too, probably
mm-hmm.
like me, like she'll be working on more
Mm-hmm.
international projects. Who knows? She might be back here working on
Mm-hmm.
America-based international shows, like something like
Mm,
that. So I think it all depends on how you get there. And everybody's path is different, so there's no
right.
fixed way
Yeah.
of getting there. But I think I really believe in this. If you have a very good script samples,
Mm-hmm.
like a two or three, like really
Mm-hmm.
good scripts,
Mm-hmm.
they will get discovered.
Mm,
Maybe not right away, but when you meet like the right people at the right
mm-hmm.
place at the right time, I think they will get discovered. Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful. And I think you said a lot of like wise things there. You know, it's like not only just the maintaining the right perspective, right? Like trying not to dwell on the depressing aspect, the aspect that you can't control, like your
And also,
identity.
like, stop blaming yourself.
Right.
It's not about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes just one person to discover your script.
Right.
You just haven't met the person yet.
Yeah. So it's like, the old adage, I keep on hanging on,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like every therapist's poster. Yeah. Okay. I think that's helpful. I
But I
appreciate that.
think I tell my students all the time, like, if they speak only English, then look at Canada, UK, like Australia, New Zealand, like
Mm,
English speaking territories. Like they
right.
have their own industries to see what other opportunities you could get. If you speak other languages, then of course, like you gotta focus.
Right.
If you can speak Spanish, South America and
Right.
Spain, like, there's so many opportunities out there.
Yeah.
They might actually need writers who are trained in the U.S.,
Yes.
especially for genre pieces, right? Like I think that's
Right. Yeah.
the world is big, and it takes time and sometimes money, but you have to be patient. But I think even in LA, there's a strong network of international filmmakers and producers.
Right.
Just meet everybody. In a way, like
Yeah.
a minority writers are in a good place because that's exactly what happened to me. I won an award, and then I was introduced to like one producer, and then
Mm-hmm.
two meetings later, I was sitting down with John Woo's producer Terrence.
Mm,
Because the community is small,
right.
so if you maneuver this right,
It can happen fast.
and if you're like a yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. When they strike while the iron's hot, it can happen fast. Yeah. Those are good reminders. Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, it does boil down to perspective and like just waiting and believing and knowing that it will happen. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a wacky world out here in LA. In Hollywood, it's like
I mean, whenever writers like talk about their life circumstances and career, if they haven't reached that yet, or like if they're like, let's say, like, once you're in the loop,
yeah.
it could be quite stable and nice, right?
Uh-huh.
But before you get there, like, people struggle. Everybody does. But
Yeah.
I always tell my students, like, look at actors.
Exactly. I feel so bad for them all the time.
It's like I mean, now we talk about diversity casting more often, but certain roles. I mean, the especially like when the budget's big, the commercial values, right? Like attached to the actors, those
Yeah.
individuals. What can we do if the role is written for white men or black men? Like where could Asian actors go? Like it's very, very limiting. In a way, it's more limiting than like Asian writers because at least like as a writer, you can write other people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like white, black, Asian, anyone, right?
Yeah.
But the actor, you're an Asian actor. You could
Can't
sometimes you can only
change it.
play that, right?
And it's like when you told me that in the early 2000s you were working on scripts with like kung fu elements, I was just like, oh my God. Because, you know, I mean, I study cinema media studies, so I study Asian American media history, and they were doing that shit like in the 70s, 1970s. And like more than 30 years later, they're still doing it. It's like when is Hollywood gonna let Asians progress onto other things? Like when are they gonna let us move on? Because we have moved on. It's to the point where I just stopped watching, or I would just watch it and then like I would get my fill from like Korean dramas, because like so many like that's sort of the old saying in Asian American like rights activism. They're like, we want to see more of our faces. I'm like, just watch a Korean drama. Like, that's what I did, and I've been fine.
I think the boom of Korean film and TV. I mean, China always had a big industry too. They do their own
Hmm.
things, but
Yeah.
that also affected the positions of Asian American actors
Yes.
because East Asia, because everybody looks alike,
Mm.
right? So that when they watch like a foreign films, movies made outside Korea, outside Japan, outside China, they prefer white or black actors.
Mm.
It's like they want to see Tom Cruise, they want to see Denzel.
Who
So,
doesn't?
exactly. So like and then on top of it, Korea specifically. Personally, I believe the casting is all about sex appeal.
Mm.
Like when I see an actor on screen, oh, I want
Hmm.
to date that person. Like it's
Yeah.
sort of like
Man or
how
woman.
relate,
Yeah.
like exactly relatable, how relatable that person is to me. Like
Hmm.
it's an illusion.
Oh yeah.
But Korea has plenty of Korean actors and actresses that that do that, right?
Yeah. Hot ones.
So the aesthetics are different too. On top of that, so that like the way Koreans view Korean American actors, for instance. I mean, Sandra always become very popular, or at least like
In Korea?
people know about her because of Killing Eve,
Oh yeah, it's a good show.
but she's not like a big movie star, right? Like she's not Tom Cruise. She's not, right? So,
Sandra
um,
Oh.
so the way they like I think there's a little bit of gap between how Asian American actors are perceived in America versus in Korea. Like
Of
they
course.
just what they find dateable, what they find sexy. It's just different,
Yeah.
of course, because it's different culture. So
Yeah.
again, that puts like Asian American actors in a sort of like in between places, in both places. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like an impossible space almost,
yeah,
And like Sandra Oh, first of all, side note on Sandra Oh. Sandra Oh was like very against Sangapur.
right.
And then
Oh, really?
after she got it,
Uh-huh.
Killing Eve took off. Fucking Koreans start paying attention to, like, she changed her kwansang and everything changed. Like she compromised her own philosophy about the whole Sangapur thing, and that bitch compromised, and that bitch succeeded.
I didn't know she got it. Oh my God.
You couldn't tell? I'm like, this bitch, this hoe got her lids done. They look good. Finally. Bitch, only took you 40 something years to fucking do it. You should have done it maybe 20 years ago. You would have fucking made it sooner. But I was just like, yeah. I was just thinking back to like the things that I heard, growing up, because like, I was watching Grey's Anatomy in college, and like people would say like, oh, you remind me of somebody on TV, Sandra Oh. I'm like, I look nothing like her. Also, in terms of Korean standards, that bitch ain't that hot. Okay, like, have you have you seen Song Hye-kyo? Have you seen Kim Tae-hee? Like,
Exactly.
don't fucking compare me to one of those bitches. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like, yeah, the aesthetics and tastes are different in different cultures. Yeah, that's an important thing to acknowledge.
It's kind of, I mean, it is the sad reality, right? Like how many years has passed and then somehow we still talk about Sandra Oh and John Cho.
Yeah, they're
Um,
so old. And they're like,
I mean, they're great, they're great, but the reality,
they
like,
are
why don't we
legends.
have?
They
Hmm?
are our, industry's hunbeder. I respect them. I bow. Namaste. But
Right.
I'm ready for new stuff. I'm ready to be on TV. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I read it. I read an article like a few years ago about I mean the like a people in art,
mm,
right? It's like a if you just look at the data, there's just not a lot of Asian Americans pursuing art. I think it's the parenting. I think there's a sort of conservatism that comes with this Asian parenting in America that Asians like target like specific majors that could lead them to like a you know
CPA,
good careers and bankers, and
pharmacist.
lawyers and doctors and all those like stereotypes we know about Asians in America. I think that's in some ways they're more conservative than Asians in Asia
Yeah,
because their upbringing and then their I mean I guess their parents' clock stopped in the 70s, a lot of them.
exactly.
So that naturally becomes sort of the influence.
And it comes with paranoia and fear as immigrants. Immigrants are precarious and they're in a constant state of anxiety and panic. Like they constantly think that they need to assimilate right now or they'll die. Like that's where their brain is at. And if they're high alert like that, they're not going to let anybody take any chances. Even though the fact is, studying to become a CPA or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, those are just as risky. They're just as risky. And like, yeah, yeah. Like, I don't know. In my case, I was lucky. Like, my parents didn't push that, shove that down my throat. I think they also just realized very soon, like early on, like STEM was not going to be my field. Like, I think they knew very early on arts and humanities is where I was going to be headed. So they bought me books, they bought me crayons. Like, they were cool in that regard, and I'm glad that they were. But yeah, the thing is though, ultimately, you do still have Asian American artists all the time. Like, in spite of those kinds of conservative parents, and they come out and they battle not only their parents and family members, but the rest of American racist society that only sees them as kung fu chinks and gooks. You know what I'm saying? So, like, in that regard, like, I bow to them. I bow to my fellow Asian American brothers and sisters who are fighting tooth and nail and insisting on being an actor or being a screenwriter. I'm like, yeah, do it. Do it.
And then if you take those acting classes, all these plays and screenplays like written for white roles,
Right.
white actors, and then if they have to study with those texts,
Mm,
that alone is very discouraging, right? I bet that those moments make the
100%.
Asian American actors very insecure.
That's microaggression. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's hopefully things change, but
Yeah. It's an uphill battle.
not not fast enough. But
It's 100% an uphill battle. But I'm in a positive state today because I just came down from the mountains, drank a lot of mountain spring water, did some psychedelics. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling positive. I'm feeling optimistic. I'm open to the universe bringing in the good stuff for me, for you, for all the other Sandra O lookalikes in the United States of America. I have these flashcard questions that I do for
Mhm.
each of my podcast episodes. Did you see that No Hee-kyung TV show on Netflix called Live?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I figured you have not. So that's good. It's good that you haven't. Okay, so let
Hmm.
me ask you some flashcard questions. Let's say you're the daughter of a single mother. Your mother suffers from a panic disorder, and so she's like on a form of disability. And your father is a man who abandoned you at birth, like he didn't care about you. and you've been trying to get a job. Okay, so you're a woman, you're college educated, you've been trying to get a job, you've been going to these job festivals, but the interviewers are mostly men and they keep asking you sexist questions like, what are you going to do when you get married and have a kid? Are you going to just like ditch your position? um, and he also asks your competitors there, your male competitors, questions about their military experience, what base were they at, who did they serve, like showing blatant favoritism through these sexist, biased questions. And you see this happening in front of you as a woman. What do you do?
Assuming the interview is taking place in Korea.
Yeah, this is all in Korea.
So, first of all, I'm a very rational, logical person.
Uh huh.
Two
Mm,
factors. The probability of getting the job. I'm talking about my like a track records, right?
mm,
And all those like internships, all sorts of things that I've done up to
sure.
that point. And the second, my financial circumstances.
Mm, mm-hmm,
If I need both, right?
mm-hmm,
Like if let's say probability is high
mm-hmm,
and that I need money,
mm,
I wouldn't flag it on the spot, but I will still find ways to answer some of the questions so that at least I could have a chance, to say whatever the other guys are doing, right? Like, so at least I would do that just to close it,
okay.
but I wouldn't fight it. I wouldn't walk out of it if
Mm,
I need the job.
mm-hmm. Money always wins.
I'm not a,
Mm,
yeah, like that interview in that setting, if I really need the job, if the job is good,
mm-hmm,
I'll fight it like when after I get the job, but not
mm-hmm.
in that place.
Yeah. Mm, okay.
But
Mm-hmm.
somehow what happens during the interview affects the way I saw the company. You know what I mean? Imagine like, oh, this is the kind of people that I'll be working with, right? That's extremely negative.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably just walk away. I would just walk out.
Okay.
I will still
Yeah.
find a way to sort of make money elsewhere. Like, you
Ah.
can teach English, make more money in Korea.
There's always that. Yeah. For us, that's like our Starbucks, you know?
Exactly, exactly. But the fun story, I have a friend in Korea whose sister used to work for one of those big companies, and her direct boss was a misogynist, and like,
Mm,
like sometimes it's psychological. Like
mm.
like after a while she realized like she's doing more work than other men when they go out to drink.
Oh
It's like
my
all
God.
this unfairness. So one
Yeah.
day she was like holding like a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah.
She walked up to the boss, poured the coffee all over on his computer, and then screamed at him and then walked out. And then like
There's more.
my friend and then her sisters and then the family, whole family got together, had a really nice meal
Mm,
together, and then
okay.
she started her own business, and then now she has an apartment in Apgujeong.
You know, bitches made it when they have an apartment in Apgujeong.
Exactly.
I love that. That's amazing. Good for her. She did this in
Exactly.
Korea?
She did this in Korea. Yep.
Oh
Years
my
ago. Years
God.
ago. Years ago.
Badass bitch. Oh my gosh. That's intense. I love that.
I know.
You know, like that's the thing. You have to find your own happiness ultimately.
Hmm.
You know, like if you really look deep within, you'll figure out the answers. Like there is
Yeah.
a way to happiness and it is on you. You
I
know,
think
there's
I
a
think
way.
the tricky thing is like in reality,
Mm.
even if you want to fight this, you still
Hmm.
have to be in it first,
Yeah,
which is not an easy thing, right? Like
it's
to begin
not.
with.
You have to be gaslighting yourself all the time.
Exactly. And then also like just walking away from it, like you're not going to make any difference. You're missing that opportunity if you could, in a way,
Mm.
no matter how impossible it seems.
Hmm.
So it's very like
You mean speaking
tricky.
up about those
Yeah,
injustices?
yeah, yeah. So I think being a writer, in some ways, you could somehow slip that in, like somehow, or you can specifically write about that if you want. I think in Korea,
Mm.
I think we see more and more sort of like strong female characters that are
Not
very
only
vocal.
that, but,
Yeah.
and this I also wanted to ask you, they're increasingly like queer characters in Korean dramas, like especially in the year 2020, they're like everywhere. I mean, they're not the main protagonist for sure, and it's problematic. They're supporting, like the queer characters are often in like weird situations. Not always, but sometimes they have a crush on the straight protagonist, which is like obviously going to be unrequited. Um, but it's like cropping up more and more. And I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think the reason for this is? Like, I have one theory, just one guess, and I don't know how it might come off, but let's just give it a stab. Like, my guess is um, the LGBTQIA rights and activism in the United States is so like it's like a model for any kind of rights activism at this point because it's so successful. It's like they're so good at organization, marketing, blah blah blah. They're amazing. I mean, they're up there with like civil rights movement people. They're like amazing. And it's like it's become trendy among Gen Zers, particularly among younger people. The notion of being queer, non-gender binary. I mean, there's a freedom almost, a liberation among um, the queer younger generations here in America, which was like even up until maybe 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been particularly the case. This is a very new thing, and it's like almost become a trend in and of itself. And there have been instances where they found cases where like some Gen Z cis male boys would just be like, "Oh yeah, I am a little gay," just to like kind of fit in because they think like that's like the trendy, cute, hip thing to be, which it is. We're all a little queer. Let's admit it. Fucking hell, yeah. But like, they're kind of sensing like, oh, like they can be more close with their female friends this way, or their girlfriends this way, or like even among guys, like it's just like a way of exhibiting their comfort as men to be okay with homosexuality, and it's fine. We're all down. We're cool. It's all love, that kind of thing. So I feel like Korea, which is always like their trend radar is like the sharpest. It is amazing, right? They had to because it was a survival skill, right? And I feel like they picked up on that trend. It's like, oh, it is cool to be down with the queers. It is cool to be down with LGBTQIA rights and activism. And they started inserting it more in webtoons and nowadays TV dramas. Like I see it almost like, every other drama. I don't know. What do you think of that phenomenon?
I, I really think that, well, first of all, I think a lot of those dramas are written by female writers.
Yes.
I think they're more open to the ideas of this gender, like, I mean, sexuality, all this stuff,
Mm,
like equality in general,
right.
like not as resistant, right? Like compared
Mm,
to male writers who
mm-hmm.
all went to like, army, and so, but I think what changed was, I would say about 10, 15 years ago, I remember seeing some TV commercials or like a fashion magazine spreads
Mm-hmm.
with sort of like a female, like a models or like actresses with like a gay characters.
Mm-hmm.
That picture, like a sort of like a maybe it's like sort of hip New York thing to do to have a gay friend, gay best
Mm,
friend. So it was very shallow. It was just about the trend. But what changed though was that even before Netflix took off in Korea, there's a lot of like there's a huge number of people like especially amongst the young people that are obsessed with American TV shows.
mm,
So as we in America started producing more shows
mm-hmm.
with gay characters, naturally
Mm-hmm.
they traveled and were
Right.
viewed by many people in Korea too. And
Yes.
then after Netflix arrived, things got even more accelerated. So I don't think they're necessarily copying American
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because so many people are watching them
Mm-hmm.
already with
Yeah.
subtitles, so
Right.
that I think they've reached the point where like sort of maybe it's okay to have at least one or two characters like that here and there.
Right.
For that to become the mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many years it's going to take to get there,
I feel like it'll be soon though.
but it has to be something very specific, like Brokeback Mountain. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be more like an event. I don't think it's going to feel
Right.
natural. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's like this is the homo show of the year in Korea. Like they have to
Right.
label it and market it as that. The gayest show. The
Yeah.
most lesbian show. You know? And then it's like cuz like I saw Search WWW and that show is like super lesbian.
Mhm.
It's not like they're not showing women like smooching and like
Yeah.
literally like coupling up, but it is super lesbian. It's
Right.
like very much there, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, God, just be like these bitches are dykes, just let them have it. It's like that's how thin the veil is to cover up that this is a queer show. It's almost like this is pointless, it's like putting tissue paper over something.
But then next morning you read a newspaper and then there's an article about this transgender soldier who committed suicide. It's like
When's
a
it gonna stop?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the military situation in Korea does factor in like a huge component of that, like the militarism, the hypermasculinity,
Yeah.
the paranoia, all of that, that's all interrelated. Yeah, I agree with you. Until that ends, this isn't going to end. That means war needs
And
to
then
end.
and then a presence of a father figure in every drama or films. Like so if you look
Uh-huh.
at movies like Sungniho, right?
Uh-huh.
If you take out like a Song Joong-ki's character entirely
Uh-huh.
and then just re-edit it as a Kim Tae-ri as a female protagonist, it
Uh-huh.
still works. Seriously, it still works.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
why not go there?
they have to
Yeah.
have a male protagonist who's become the
I
father figure with the backstory involving him being a father. It's like they have to put that all in there to sort of
maybe these network decision makers are they themselves gay? Maybe they
maybe
should ask themselves that. Maybe they're gay.
maybe
That's why they're so hung up on these hot pretty boys, you know?
that's true.
It's like y'all are all homo, You want to hide the homo, but like y'all are deep in the closet. Like just come out. Come out and play. We don't bite. It's fun. It's good. All right, let me ask you a couple more flashcard questions.
Hmm.
And then our mutual friend Thomas Booker has a question for you, so we'll end on
Okay.
that. But let's say you're a grown man, you're in your late 20s, you're working an unpaid internship in some water supply company, and you put all of your savings into this company's stocks, because that's like a requirement in the job. And you made your mom and your older brother also put their entire you already know where this is going.
Yeah.
One day you come to work and realize that you've been scammed. The company's been dissolved. You lost all of your money, your whole family savings, all of it is gone. What do you do?
Oh my God. Are we talking about Korea? Are we talking about the
Of
US?
course it's Korea. It's like branded as Korea.
If it's US, I would say I'll join the army, but
Okay.
I'm gonna kill the bitches. Uh, but in Korea, that might actually put me into a very dark place.
Mm.
That might inspire the sequel to The Chaser.
When Chaser came out, I was in Korea on a Fulbright in 2009. And I was like, it was
Mm,
on TV all the time. I was living in Mapo at the time.
mm,
Every night when I walked home, I was just terrified.
mm.
And everybody around me, they're like, you're in Korea, like the safest place. I'm like, have you seen The Chaser? I do not feel safe in Korea at night, ever. That movie scared the bejesus out of me. Um, anyway, great. Okay, let me ask you. I don't know. Let me find a good one. All right. Let's say you're a police officer. Okay.
Hmm.
You recently got hired. You're like a junior ranking, right? You have a crush on a fellow woman police officer, right?
Hmm.
But One day, you see your 선배 kissing her. What do you do?
Is he married?
He's
Like,
not, unfortunately. I mean, that would have been some good drama, but he's
if
not. He's
if he's
single.
not married, stakes are not high enough. But anyway, uh,
Yeah, it's not. It's not. It's just a crush.
if it's just a crush, I'll let it pass.
Really? You're just gonna let it go, huh? Not a fighter.
Let it go. I'll let it go. Yeah. I'm a
Okay.
realist. I'm a realist. You
You
know me. I'm a
are.
realist.
You're very pragmatic. Yeah, you're too pragmatic. You wouldn't be able to write a good makjang if you do this. No. You have to
No,
take it
no.
to the other level. Okay,
I
fine.
know.
All right, good. All right. Let me ask you the question that our buddy Thomas asked because it was so interesting. Like, right when I was texting you, he texted me too.
Hmm.
So this is what he says. Say hi to Shino. Ask him why he is secretly in love with so many older women.
I think of all the scripts that I wrote, I mean, of course, not all of them get made into films, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite scripts all have like older, middle-aged women
Mm-hmm.
as the protagonists. I don't know why. I have like a
Oh.
Korean Meryl Streep living inside of me. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. You have a 고두심 inside of you.
I know. And then like even like stories in, like about motherhood or like movies like that. Like
Yeah.
I get really emotionally affected by it.
Wow.
Uh, it's not like I have a mother complex or like, my
Right.
mom is fine, you know?
I mean, you say you don't have a mother complex. Let your psychiatrist decide that. But okay, yeah, you don't have hangups about your mother, but mm,
But I think maybe maybe because I'm Korean, I would say,
mm,
no matter how Americanized I am, the part of me, like big part of me, is still Korean, and I think, especially if you're Korean men,
mm,
your relationship with your mom is like very tight, very very
yeah.
similar to Jewish American families or like
Uh,
Greek families, like the tightness between
mm-hmm,
the bond between mothers and sons.
mm-hmm.
Luckily, I don't think I became Mama's boy, but but there is always that sort of that there's something about motherhood like within the culture.
Yeah,
Maybe that this sounds more like rational, like assessment of it, but
yeah,
I remember this like when we first met,
yeah,
like we're talking about like getting feedback, right? Like
yeah.
so when I write a screenplay, I mean like some of the works I'm not supposed to like
Mm-hmm,
send it to other people, so contractually
mm-hmm,
I can't.
mm-hmm,
But personally, sometimes just to get some notes on it, like I
mm-hmm,
ask a friend or like assistant writer in this case, particularly
mm-hmm.
specifically about this TV show. But some of the screenplays, like I always like send them to my mom because
I
she watches
remember.
everything. She
Mm-hmm,
watches everything, and because for me, and then she's very like instinctively clever. So if she doesn't get it,
mm-hmm,
right, then that forces me to question it like oh, what did I miss, right? Like but
mm-hmm.
also to me the relationship between your characters and the audience, that
Mm-hmm.
invisible relationship, is
Yes.
quite important, especially if you're writing a genre pictures.
Yeah.
So she's become my sort of reader, personal
Mm-hmm.
reader that way. But I don't think that has anything to do with me sort of like being obsessed with middle-aged women. But then, when I watched this movie, have you seen Two of Us?
I don't think so.
The French language film directed by Italian director
Mm,
about these two old ladies in love.
mm,
I was really moved by
mm.
it. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what that is. I guess this is something that I have to like discover,
Analyze
like
on your
yeah,
own.
analyze
Yeah.
for the rest of my
Meditate.
life.
Yeah. It's cool. I like that. Yeah, I do remember you saying that. You were like, I write screenplays that my mom will be able to understand, and that's how I access my audiences. And I'll say, oh, that's really beautiful. I like that. You write for the mother's gaze. That's cool.
Right.
I love that. Sweet. Thank you so much for talking with me. It's always
You're welcome.
I always have such a great time catching up with you and chatting with you. Like I like our suda. I
Yeah,
enjoy that. Next time we'll
exactly.
do it with a little,
Yes.
and a little.
Yes.
Next week, I'm going to talk about a really delightful show called Hello My 20s. I call it a delightful show because it's a very realist show, but it's also hilarious. And email me if you have any questions, or if you want to say some nice words to me. You can email me at kdramaschool@gmail.com. You can follow me on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can like this page on Facebook as well. You could definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, K-Drama School. That would be helpful. But folks, this was an intense episode. It's because I am going through an intense episode. I always do whenever I come back home. But all of this is a good thing. It means big things are about to happen. So let's stay alert. All right. Thank you for listening. I'll see you guys next week.